Hello everybody, it's Drew for Prepare for Collapse. Today I want to talk about cleaning the MSR ceramic water filter and talk a little bit about the difference between filtration and purification. Filtration is removing particulates or particles from water. Those particles can include things like protozoa, certain cysts or things of waterborne pathogens that can cause you to be injured. Physically removing those particles from your drinking water. Purification, on the other hand, doesn't remove anything by itself in the water. What that does is you introduce a chemical to the water, either through a filter element or through some chemical you place in the water, or through ultraviolet light in some of the newer systems to kill any biological pathogen that may be in the water. That being said, since you can't really remove chemicals from water reliably, even with charcoal filtration, you need to have some idea that the water that you're taking your drinking water from, the water source you're taking your drinking water from, is relatively clean. If you have biological life living in that water, it's probably fairly clean chemically, especially if you have fish or insects that live in the water. But it may be very dirty biologically. The other thing that filtration won't take out are things like dissolved salts and certain other dissolved things that are chemical compounds in the water. They're not necessarily chemicals that we think of like gasoline or PCBs. They're salts or other compounds that are dissolved in solution in water. Filters won't take those out for the most part. Neither will purifiers. One thing I do get asked about sometimes is radiological contamination. How do you clean it? Well, the first thing you do is you want to take your pickup hose off of the filter, because this is essentially contaminated with dirty water. You don't want to have anything near you to do that. If you're in the field, this whole outside of the filter is considered, a contaminated surface. But you want to take the filter housing, just unscrew it from the bottom of the pump. And you set the pump aside, because this pump is all dirty water side, so it's not going to have any problems. The filter itself pops out, and this is one place you want to be a little careful. If you have a clean hand, that's the time you want to use your clean hand, is to pop this filter out. And that filter just pops up and comes out like this. Particulates that your filter will remove from the water in most cases. Things like fallout, particles, dust, those things are typically parts of the nuclear weapon core, or parts of the core of the reactor, or parts of the radiological material within the dirty bomb that have been atomized or aerosolized and have condensed back into solid form. Those get into the water and are suspended in the water like small dirt particles and can be filtered out. There are some compounds that can be generated by those events that are water soluble. And if you have those compounds in your water, there is no way that the filter can filter them out. It's just like a salt in the water. So if you have a radiological situation, it's really important that you have some radiological metering device like a Geiger counter or something, and know how to use it. And that's another video. The other thing to keep in mind is if you have to use your filter to remove radiological particles from water, those radiological particles are going to be trapped in your filter element, and they're going to be concentrated, which means that the filter itself is going to be more radioactive than the surrounding environment. If you're in a situation where you have a low level of radiation in the environment, things like rainwater runoff can concentrate that fallout in a pooling water source. And when you filter water from that source, particularly if you have to filter water from that source repeatedly, it can accumulate in your filter, and you can have a much higher level of radiation or radioactivity in your water filter than you would have in the surrounding environment. And that's because those particles are trapped and concentrated on the outside of your filter. There are ways you can deal with that. That's really beyond what I want to talk about today, because it's fairly unlikely that you're going to have to deal with that situation. In general terms, when you're out in the field and you have to clean this filter, first question is, how do I know I have to clean this filter? When your flow rate goes down by about 40 to 50%, or whenever your force to pump the pump goes up by 30 to 40%, you're going to tell. you know, the filter will start to feel a little spongy, your flow rate will go down, and you know, you have to observe how the filter's working, because that can happen in silty water, even water that looks relatively clean. If it's water from a glacial source and has glacial till suspended in it, it may look a bit milky, and it doesn't look muddy per se, but that milkiness to the water is sort of a high concentration of you know, sort of rock filings and things that are suspended in the glacial ice. When it melts, it runs off. It'll plug a filter up in less than, you know, a liter and a half of water if it's really bad. If you have to filter very dirty water, the same thing can happen. You might have to clean it a couple times to fill 2 or 3 liters of water. How do you clean it? Well, the first thing you do is you want to take your pickup hose off of the filter, because this is essentially contaminated with dirty water. You don't want to have anything near you to do that. You know, if you're in the field, this whole outside of the filter is considered, you know, a contaminated surface. But you want to take the filter housing, just unscrew it from the bottom of the pump, and you set the pump aside, because this pump is all dirty water side, so it's not going to have any problems. The filter itself pops out. The way that you clean this, I try to make sure I hold it either by the dirty water end, which is the end without the big red O-ring, or by the little plastic bezel that holds the O-ring in place. Green Scotch-Brite's what I typically use to clean mine. And I'll get this wet with a little clean water typically. You can use dirty if you have to, but I usually do a little clean water and just scrub along the outer surface of this. And this abrades off the outside layer of the filter. And your large particles that plug the filter up will be mostly along the outside layer. So this actually scrapes away or abrades away the outside layer of the filter and gives you a clean surface. This one was clean when I came back from my last camping trip. It's in good shape, so there's not anything I have to do to it now. For reassembly, once that's scrubbed off, you rinse it with a little water. A little clean water is perfect. And once we've done that, I'm going to sit this down on the wild water or dirty water side. I take my little bracket off the bottom of my clean water cover that's a gauge, and that gauge looks like a red C, and I'm going to attempt to put it around the filter. If this goes over the filter element and it'll go more than halfway down the filter element, then the element has had so much of the surface taken away that it's no longer effectively going to be able to filter your water. This is a relatively new filter, so we don't have any real problem with that. So we'll put the filter back into the filter housing, put our clean water cover on the bottom to keep our clean water side clean, sit that down, and then we can clean the pump. The pump only needs to be cleaned if you've got some gunk in it or if you've been in sandy water. This is, I believe, polycarbonate, and if you've been in an area that has a lot of sand or a lot of silt, it can erode. There's a split pin in the top that you just squeeze together, and it sort of pops out this side. And there's a bushing that goes into on this side that comes out. And then you just pull this out of this is your piston, your pump piston, and your pump chamber. You just clean those out with a cloth or a paper towel. This you want to have, usually what I use on this is actually chapstick. Petroleum jelly will work, just something to kind of seal it up. You don't want to use anything super toxic, but typically I use chapstick on it, like an unflavored chapstick. And I can put this back together, put my bushing back in, and my pin back in. Make sure they snap together or it'll fall apart on you. And the last thing that you have to take a look at is the check valve on this end, and that just helps hold air pressure on the wild side of the filter so that it works between pumps. It keeps flowing the whole time you're pumping, and that just screws out. You just wipe this down, and then you can screw it back into the housing. There's a number of seals in this pump. The Mountain Safety Research sells a parts kit or an overhaul repair kit for it. I recommend keeping one of those in your bag with your filter, or in your group have somebody that has one of those. Then you just thread it all back together. It doesn't have to be super tight, just watertight. Put your hose back on, and just it winds around the filter. and you're all done. Obviously, you want to make sure you store your little cartridge tester there. We talked about purification. This is the purification system that I use. There's several different brands of this, but this is MicroPure, which is chlorine dioxide tablets. You want to make sure these are in tablet form. One of the problems you'll have if you carry these around and they get crushed up, they may react faster than you really want them to. These things need to react in a closed vessel so that all that gas that produces the oxidizer in your water is present. So if you have crushed up pellets or crushed up tablets, they'll work in an emergency, but you want to use a whole tablet if you can, like an intact tablet. But that's all there is to the water filter. And some people ask me, well, what happens if I drop my filter or I get something on my filter that I've got to clean out in the field? Most of the time with this type of filter, that's not going to be a problem, because the only part of this filter that is ever exposed that's a clean water side is this little circle with a little outlet in the middle and this little cup here. That's the only part of this filter that's a clean water part of the filter that's ever exposed to the environment. Even if you drop the filter, the outside of that filter is dirty water side, so other than just getting some gunk on the outside of your filter that you can wipe off, that's not going to be a huge problem. Now, one thing you can do if you get the clean water side of that filter dirty, or you drop it in the creek, drop it in the water, whatever you're doing, I keep a small bottle or small flask of rum in my bug out bag, and that's not to drink. That's so that if I do have an accident with my water filter, you can just wipe it off with rum, rinse it with your clean water, and you're good to go. It's not toxic, at least in the quantity it's going to take to clean your water filter off. But if there's other videos you all would like to see in the coming weeks, please let me know. I plan to upload a lot more than we have in the past. Subscribe, like, and comment. Again, this is Drew for Prepared for Collapse. Be safe out there.